Here's a tutorial for a Photoshop exercise called Pixel. So you'll find the file under the Photoshop tab and then the Photoshop exercises tab. Scroll down to here. I've got a little blurb here explaining all the steps, but I'm going to show you in this video too. If you click on this file, it's a JPEG. It'll automatically download for you. So now it's in my downloads folder. I'm going to open this up in Photoshop. So if you double click it, it might open in a different program. So to open it in Photoshop, you can right click, open with Photoshop, or you can click and drag the file into the icon in the dock, and that'll open up this photo here. So I'm using this picture of my cat because, not lying, his name is Pixel. So of course I had to use him for a Photoshop exercise. Look at this cutie. Alright, so first I'm going to show you something that's really important, or that you'll use a lot in Photoshop, is checking the image size and resolution of your image. So actually, before we start, I'll just explain a bit about the interface. So Photoshop is different to Illustrator in the way that where you see your work here, it's not really a page in the same way that Illustrator is. So I can't make another artboard off to the side here like you can do in Illustrator, and you also can't put anything on the side here on, let me just close this so you can see better. So in Illustrator and InDesign, this area outside of your working space is called the pasteboard, but in Photoshop you can't use this space for anything. Everything happens on the image. Or if you make a new file, you can make a new file be wide like a page, but that's still kind of classified your image space. So that's just something to be aware of. You also use layers a lot more in Photoshop. Everything is reliant on layers. So anytime you're creating a new effect or a new piece, you would put it on a new layer, and that's when naming your layers becomes really important too. Otherwise it looks kind of same but different. So we've got the toolbar on the left here, our control bar on the top, and all our panels on the right hand side. So all the panels will look a bit different because they're just different to Illustrator. They have different features. So this is the default workspace, essentials. So the same as Illustrator, you can change your workspace if you like to. And then also all the other windows for things are shown here, the same as like in Illustrator. So the ones with the ticks are the ones that are active. And another important panel is this history panel. So every time you do something, it'll show as like a log here, and then you can go back and forth in the history. I don't think that's in Illustrator or InDesign at all, but it's kind of handy to have because you can just, rather than going edit, undo, you can see what you've done and then undo it to a certain point or redo it. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So let's check out the size of our image. So I'm going to go up to this image menu and then image size. Click on that. And this is telling me my image is 86 centimeters by 115-ish centimeters, and it's 72 ppi, so pixels per inch. So 72 ppi is screen resolution. So if I was using something for the web, this would be a good resolution, and then the size would depend on what you were using it for. For print, the resolution, or the standard resolution for print, is 300 ppi. So if I was to print this image, if I show you the difference, so you can see here the width and the height are linked. So if I change the width, if I type in here 50 centimeters, for example, it'll automatically change the height to keep the proportion. If I untick the resample, this now links the resolution in with it. So it's going to link the width, the height, and the resolution. So if I change the resolution here to 300, it will automatically resize the image to suit that, which brings it down to about 21 centimeters by 27-ish. So that would be the size I could happily print it at, around A4. So if you had an image that you were using and it was very small and then you wanted to do like an A3 print, for example, this is a good way to check if that's possible or if it'll look good when it prints. If you scale it up, it will just become pixelated and blurry. So I'm just going to hit cancel. I don't need to resize this, but I want to show you where that is because it's really important to know your image size and resolution. Cool, so we're going to start with the crop tool. So if you come over to the toolbar, this little square looking one, if you roll over it, it'll say crop tool. I'm going to click on that, or you can hit C on the keyboard, it's the keyboard shortcut. And then you can drag in these corners or these bars on the side to resize this crop box. So it's giving me a preview of what it will look like when I apply this crop. You can also, up in the top here, select a ratio. So I might want to keep the original ratio the photo was taken at, and it will resize this box to suit. So if I click and drag from the corner, it's forcing it into that original proportion. I can't make it whatever size I want. For that, you've got to change it back to ratio. Or if you want it to be square, you could choose 1:1. That will make it square ratio. And then there's a few popular ones here, so 4:5, 16:9. And then there's also pixel sizes here, if you wanted to use those. So I'm just going to leave mine on free. Ooh, or maybe I'm not. I'll just leave it on the original. And then up to you however you want to crop this. It doesn't matter. You could come in really close, or you could have it open up. Change that to square. The other thing I can do while I've got the crop tool active is straighten. So you can see here this line in the background where the table meets the wall, it's not perfectly horizontal. So I'm going to go up here where it says straighten, this little level icon, click on that. And that brings up this level tool, which when I click and drag, so I'm clicking and dragging across the line that I want to straighten, and that will rotate it automatically to the line that I drew. Cool. The other thing you can do is click and drag the image around, so you don't have to just use the little sliders on the box. You can move the image by just clicking and dragging. Cool. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to hit the Enter key to apply the crop, and you'll notice that's cropped off everything that was around the outside, so what was in grey in that previous preview. But what's happened is it's gotten rid of those pixels. So I can't, so now if I click the crop tool again, I can't say, oh, actually I cropped too far, I want to go back again. See how now when I try to expand it out, it just goes to white? That's what happens by default, is it just chops those pixels off completely. So I'm going to see my history. I can see when I opened it. I'm just going to click that. Actually, it's not going to let me because I'm in this crop kind of preview. See the layers here, it says crop preview. So if I hit enter, I'm just going to undo that right to the beginning when we opened. And I'll show you a little setting to change when you're cropping. So I'm still on the crop tool. I'm going to click and drag where I want to crop. Resize this a little bit. I'm going to straighten it again. Click and drag. That'll straighten up. And then see this tick box up here, delete cropped pixels? Untick that. And when you untick that, it won't delete all the part that you're cropping off. So if I hit enter now to apply that crop, and then I decide, oh, actually I want to change something, I'm going to click on this again with my crop tool, and you can see everything that had previously been cropped off is still there. So if I wanted to shift that a bit or move things around or rotate it differently, I'm able to do that now. I'm just going to bring this in so I don't get that transparency. The checkerboard in the background means it's transparent. There's no color in that area. But we'll get into that a bit more later on when we do selection tool and different things. Okay, so I've got my delete crop pixels box unticked. I'm going to hit enter and that applies the crop. Next, I'm going to show you layer adjustments. So If you see on the layers panel, in the bottom of the layers panel, the circle that's half filled, I'm going to click on that. And then there's a lot of different options here. So I'm just going to show you a few of these, or some of the popular ones. So we're going to start with brightness contrast. And then you'll see in the properties panel above that, it brings up this brightness and contrast set of sliders. So, and also it's added the layer in the layers panel. So I can click and drag on these sliders. So the brightness, I can increase the brightness or decrease the brightness, and you'll see that's affecting the image here. So zoom in a little bit. And then it's just up to you how you want to fiddle around with this image. You might want to increase the contrast. There's no right or wrong, it's all subjective. And it's mostly just to have a play around with what these layer adjustments do, or adjustment layers, I should say. So I'm pretty happy with that, and it's automatically applied, so I don't need to hit enter or anything for that to apply. The other thing I'll show you is the eyeball, these little visibility toggles. So that's the same as in Illustrator. So if I click that off, it turns off that brightness layer, or brightness and contrast layer. If I turn it back on, it applies it. So you can see on the image when I click that on and off, it's a good way to check the difference between what happened with your adjustment. So I'm going to turn that off, and we'll try a different adjustment layer. So next I'm going to click on levels, and levels brings up this histogram, and it's showing the light and dark and mid-tone areas of the image. I'm just going to scroll this down a bit so we can see. So on the right hand side is the highlights, the middle area is the mid-tone, and the left hand side is the dark parts of the image. And then you can use these sliders underneath. So if I bring that in a bit, that'll make it brighter. If I take the darkness to the right, that'll make the dark areas darker. So see how the highlights don't really change, but the dark areas change. So same thing, play around with this. The center one's the mid-tone, so you can also slide that back and forth. It depends how moody you want to make this. Light and bright. And this just gives you a bit more control than brightness and contrast does. So levels is I guess, more advanced way of adjusting the highlights, shadows, and midtones in your image. So there's that. I can turn that one on and off. See the difference. And then you can see in my history here, every time you click anything, it comes up in your history. So if I click back here, that was when I was adjusting the brightness and contrast layer. And you can click through in the history to see what's up to. If I do something now, it'll wipe the future part of that history. So just be careful with that when you're clicking back through the history. History can be rewritten. Okay, so I'm going to click on the very last adjustment I made here in the history to go to where I was. And I'm going to turn that the level layers off. Clicking again on this circle, we're going to choose hue saturation. And then the properties panel, you'll see these two sliders. So the hue is the color. So if I slide this around, you'll see the image change in color. So that's a really easy way to make color adjustments to your image. You don't have to be too extreme if you didn't want to. So if it was an image that was a bit too warm and you wanted to be a bit cooler, you could use the hue to that. There's other filters and things you can use, but this is one way to do that. Or if you wanted to make it a crazy color, or if you had a photo of like a landscape and you wanted the sky to be more vibrant, you might be able to make it more bluey toned, something like that. So we can have a purple cut. And then the saturation is how much color or the intensity of the color. So if I slide this up, it becomes more intense. And then to the left becomes less saturated or less color. And if you go all the way, it'll create black and white. So I'm going to bump that up a little bit. Now we've got purple kitty cat. So I'm going to turn that layer off. And then one more I wanted to show you is the black and white adjustment layer. And this is a nice way to create black and white images because you get some more options. So there's a preset drop down up here, which if you just flick through these until there's one that you like the look of. I quite like red filter. And then if I scroll down on the properties panel, it also gives you all these other sliders that you can adjust. So this is relating to the red parts of the original image or the yellow parts of the original image. So if there was an image you had that had a lot of greens in it, this is where you could particularly adjust that section. You can also add a tint in this adjustment layer. So if I click the tint, the default is like this sepia color. If I click on that tint box, I can also choose other colors. I'm just going to untick web colors. So if you wanted to tint it with red or green or blue or any color, you can do that using this feature. Or if you untick that, it'll have no color, just black and white. So another thing with these layers, so you'll notice I turned the other layers off when I created a new one. So I can turn that one off, that's our original image. If I turn multiple on, it applies both of them. So whichever ones are visible are the ones you can see being applied to the image. So if I click them all on, that's what it looks like when I've got all of these visible. Or if I turn off the levels layer, that's what that looks like. If I turn off the black and white layer, that's what it looks like. So you can have a play around with the different combinations of layers. You don't have to do combinations, but just to show that you're able to do that. You can layer these on top of each other. Cool. So now to save this file, you have to save a Photoshop file. If you save a JPEG, for example, it won't support these layers. So if you save a JPEG, it'll look like however it looks on the screen now. But if you wanted to edit it later, when you open the JPEG, it won't have these layers anymore. It flattens them all. So you want to make sure to save, I'm going to go save as a Photoshop document. So under the format, make sure you've got Photoshop ticked. It does do it by default because I've put layers into my file. Photoshop says, oh, you probably want to save a Photoshop file, yeah? So PSD is the acronym for Photoshop document. So you can tell there it is saving a Photoshop file. And then you can click save. Oh, I should have put my name in it. Always put your name in your files when you're adjusting them, but you can do that when you're working on your file. I've just clicked on that crop tool again. You can see if I wanted to adjust that, you can, or make it smaller. All our other pixels are still there, as well as our cat pixel. Okay, that was it. Thank you. Bye.